Welcome to Crafts and Minis. It's so good to be back after coming from GenCon, the largest North American tabletop convention that there is. Over 70,000 people packed into Indianapolis, Indiana this August, and it was a ton of fun. And this year I entered into something I haven't done for a number of years. This was my 12th GenCon, and when I first went to GenCon, I entered into the speed painting competitions, but I haven't done that since my very first year at GenCon, and I've always wanted to go back to it. So this year I finally was able to sign up for the events and get some painting in. And I wanted to share the results with you today. Also, I took some classes for the first time at GenCon that I want to show you a little bit about. And because I went to GenCon and was painting all 4 days, I started a new hashtag hobby streak, so I'm getting after that hobby. But here's what I got done in the speed painting competition. Now, the way the speed painting works at GenCon is that there's 16 people competing in one round, and you each get the same two brushes, a detail brush and like a flat brush, and then you also get the same 12 paints, two of which are metallics, and then you get 45 minutes to paint it in. Your palette is a paper plate, and you're limited in what you can do. You can't bring your own brush or anything like that. So this was a lot of fun to do. And I hadn't painted, honestly, for a few months before GenCon, so I was a little rusty. So knocking the rust off was with my first round, and I painted this elf. Now, admittedly, I didn't push the highlights too much. It didn't stand out that much, and it wasn't my best paint job. This is fine for tabletop standard, just to get out for a game of D&D, but it definitely didn't stand out compared to the other contestants. Because what happens with the speed painting is you all get 45 minutes, and then they put all 16 in a line, which are the exact same miniature, and the judge comes by and looks maybe for a total of 5 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes usually at all of them, and then comes up with the top 3 miniatures. And so my first miniature was good for me to get the rust off, but I didn't actually place in the top 3. That was a Reaper Bones competition. The second round I competed in was an Ironwind Metals competition. You can already tell some of the paint scratching off on the base because this is a metal mini, and edges are not friends to metal minis and paint. But this was a fun fighter to paint up. It wasn't my cleanest paint job. A little sloppy Joe, some splotchiness. But it was a fun attempt. It didn't place in this round, so I didn't get top 3, but that was still fun. Then I decided, okay, I've knocked the rust out. I've gotten the jitters out of the way because it was the competition, and I'm just going to have fun with some painting. And that's what happened in my next round. It was a Reaper Bones round, and I painted this dwarf baker, which turned out really well. You can see the pie turned out great. And I had a little transition, as you can see on the beard, of colors, which looked really good from arm's length. And this got second place. So in the top 2 placing in this round, you made it to the final round. So I made it to the final round on Sunday because of this dwarf, which was a lot of fun. Now, I didn't own that many beforehand, and I probably wouldn't have picked up the dwarf baker if it hadn't been for GenCon in this competition. But hey, now I got it, and I really like it. My next round was supposed to be Reaper Metal, but they didn't have the Reaper Metal actually sent to them in time. So we actually had a 3D printed Reaper Mini, and that was this Bee Warrior. And this Bee Warrior was a lot of fun, like all of them, to paint. I tried to make this stand out quite a bit more by pushing the colors. You can see the eyes, there's a little transition in color, and as well on the shield. And when you only have 45 minutes, you got to pick only a few parts to really stand out. But fortunately, this bee, even though it placed third, got me into the final round for Reaper, again, a second final round on Sunday. So that was really fun. The Sunday competitions were all the finals competitions for the speed painting. Then another round I painted in was from Impact Miniatures, and this was a chibi miniature of John Wick. Now that I say that, you can probably tell. Now, this is a miniature I wouldn't have picked up on my own to paint, but it was actually a lot more fun than I thought it would be. I got to focus a lot, of course, on the face. And at the end, I wanted to do something with the base, but it was a little sloppy Joe on my part. And then I did some blood splatter because it was John Wick. So that was something. I don't know if it worked that well. But man, some of the contestants that were in this with me did some beautiful painting of the bases. One looked just like a city street and was incredible. So I didn't place with this one either, but I had a lot of fun. And yeah, the face turned out okay. Then we get to Sunday and to the final rounds of the speed painting. Those are my last two miniatures. I'm more pleased with the first two of these than the second. But you can see this fighter. I pushed the highlights quite a bit and the shadows. And you can tell even the armor, even though I went with the choice to make it leather armor, turned out okay, as well as the cloth tabard. And I really liked this one. The face was a little sloppy. It didn't place in the end. There were some amazing painters in that final round, and some did some real work on the shield, which I didn't do. But this was a ton of fun to paint, and I was really happy with the results, and that was just great. Then finally is this miniature. Now, when the judge pulled out this miniature for the last round, actually, she was the one who was judging sometimes, running the event other times. She was running this final round, and there was someone else judging. But she was kind of hesitant to show us which mini she picked out because it is super detailed. And all of us kind of took a deep breath when we saw how detailed this miniature was. And that's what really ended up getting me off course with this miniature. Because it was so detailed, I wanted to do a wash to pick out all the stuff on the midsection, the belt. And I did a black wash there, but then I said, oh, well, I'll just wash the whole thing, which was a total mistake to do a black wash all over because it really canceled out some of my depth and highlights on the cloak or the dress, whatever it is. And that was too bad. And it messed up my face when I tried to fix it up after that. And I really didn't do anything special with the hair. And it was just kind of an okay effort. But it was fun to be in the final round and to be able to compete with such great people. So that was Reaper and Impact Miniatures. And there was I entered into one other round of speed painting, but I broke the miniature. So this is going to be a little interesting to show you. This is a Doctor Strange miniature that we all painted, and mine broke off. And yes, this is painted, but I did it up in grayscale. So like the comic was in grayscale, and I totally forgot to paint the base edge, which is unfortunate. And it's not my cleanest paint job, but I thought it was okay for trying to do something new to stand out, even though he broke. But at least he broke after the judging. So he was a difficult miniature to do. Now, some other things I did besides speed painting at GenCon, which were a ton of fun, where I took two classes, one on miniature painting and one on sculpting. And the miniature painting was from somebody named like M3 Studios on YouTube, I believe. I forget his real name, but it's M3 Studios. I think he has like 3 painting videos up on YouTube, but he's super accomplished and he paints for like Privateer Press and stuff and does just incredible work. But he showed us a way to paint in grayscale when doing freehand, and then to go over with just glazes to bring out color. And we were all painting the same thing, a skull. And this is my final product, which I thought turned out really cool. Yeah, I had to clean it up a little bit, but I thought those points where the highlights were and the midtones and the shadows worked out really well. So it was really fun to do that. And even though the classes are a little more expensive than other events, well worth it to have that experience of that class of freehand, because I don't freehand a lot of miniatures. And then I have to share, I kind of geeked out over my next class because it was Joe Orteza, which if you're an old school Warhammer person in the United States, you've heard of Joe or you've seen his work because he's won a ton of Golden Demons and did amazing conversion stuff back in the day, like 20 years ago when he was competing. And I remember his stuff was so awesome. He also helped start Adepticon, one of the founders of Adepticon, and he actually sculpted a beardless squat assassin miniature that I have somewhere. I can't find it, but I have it somewhere. And I told him I had that, and he said, it's funny. He got vindicated all these years later after people made fun of him for making a squat without a beard. Now the leagues of Votan all are beardless for the most part, right? So it was just funny. But he taught us how to sculpt with green stuff. Oop, got a little picture there. So we sculpted on a mirror. So the green stuff could be worked with easier. And the first thing we did was the purity seal. And that was awesome. Then he showed us how to do a difference between a leaf and a feather. So the leaf is on the right, the feather's on the left, which was cool. And then the middle part I didn't do very well. It's my attempt at chain. But it was really fun to have that experience sculpting with Joe. And he is a master at the craft. And it was just a really cool part of GenCon. Now, the other fun part about GenCon is just getting motivated to get back after that hobby. And I started a new hobby streak at GenCon with those 4 days of painting and the speed painting competitions. So I've kept that up since GenCon. I did a really quick paint job on this Privateer Press miniature, which originally was in their role-playing line for the Iron Kingdoms. But this one actually is a plastic miniature that came from one of their board games from Privateer Press. He was painted up really quick. Then a friend of mine, I had a D&D miniature of his, of a character of his on my desk forever. And he gave me the instruction he wanted it in the colors white, gray, and black. So that's what I did. Painted him up that way. And he said red swords, so I did red swords. And I thought he turned out pretty well. So that was cool to paint up also. And then I wanted to push some highlights again because I was really liking what I was doing with those highlights at GenCon. And you can tell my GenCon miniatures are all the same color palette, right? Like the black, purple, and orangish colors, which I thought, if it's working, let's just press into it and do all of them that way, which was a lot of fun. But this, I had to get back to my favorite color, teal. And here is a teal miniature. Again, from Privateer Press. Back in the day, this was a mercenary, I believe, in War Machine. Came as a pair with a guy with a couple pistols. And this is supposed to be an elf. And I really pushed the highlights on this one, which from arm's length looks pretty good. Up close, it doesn't look that great, but arm's length looks pretty good. But so that's what I've been after. GenCon was a ton of fun. I love conventions when I'm able to go to them. They just give you new motivation for the hobby. I was able to pick up a lot more paints and supplies and all of that, which was great. Give me an extra stuff to try out that I'll tell you about. And I just really appreciate you sticking with the channel. It's been a while since I last updated. Can't promise when I'll update again, but I do hope this gave you some motivation to go get after that hobby.